There it is. Hello. Hello. Welcome, everyone. This is TCG Service. We do a lot of dinner-style stuff because this is a family. Christy always says, like, whenever we come together and do communion, it is not the little wafers and juice. It is the food that you get to eat and commune with one another. And that is our Saturday service. So Christy sent me a blessing for y'all before we start, before she comes up and does the sermon. And it's about discomfort and leaning into it. And I think a lot of times when we come into church spaces, we hear a lot of blessings surrounding peace and comfort that can kind of lead to some apathy. So this is a different kind of blessing, and I think it's really beautiful. It is by a Franciscan benediction, and it says this: "May God give you discomfort when you hear easy answers and half-truths and see superficial relationships, so that you may live deep within your heart. May you feel anger when you see injustice and oppression and exploitation of people, so it may inspire you to work for justice, freedom, and peace. May you shed tears for those who suffer pain, rejection, hunger, and war, so that you may reach out your hand to comfort them and to turn their pain into joy. And may you be blessed with enough foolishness to believe that you can make a difference in the world, so that you can do with what others claim cannot be done, to bring justice and kindness to all people who live in the margins."
Hello, everybody. Oh my gosh, I've missed being up here. It's been a couple of weeks. We had Allie visit, which was fun and wonderful, and then Rue preached last week, which was wonderful and amazing. And my microphone is still fitted to Rue's ear, so give me a second. There we go. Okay, see if that works. It's good to see you. So we gave our worship team the night off tonight, so Holly and Alyssa get to just relax. We are going to have music, but it's going to be a little bit creative tonight. So I pulled a couple of music videos from some songs that we've never done here before. So as we get to them tonight, I'm going to introduce them to you, but we're going to have worship electronically that direction. So before we start, here's kind of how I want to frame us tonight, and here's kind of where I want to set our minds. And that is, I think as people, as humans, as humanity, I think that we are designed to be curious. Would you guys agree with that statement? Yes, no? Yes, raise your hand. No, raise your other hand. Okay, cool. So we're mostly on the same page. So I think that we are innately curious. Right? I think we innately tend to also maybe be distrustful a little bit because we are curious and because we question. It's kind of like, I need to believe that. I need to see that maybe before I can believe that. Sharita and I had a conversation recently. I don't know if you remember this or not, but it came up again in our podcast this week. And one of the things that I love about Sharita so much is Sharita is my question asker in my life. And if I ever have a plan or I ever have an idea, I know that I'm going to call Sharita. Bob does it too. I will tell you that. They both do this for me. And they start to question. And what about this? And what about this? And a lot of people, if we have question askers in our lives, do you go to them or do you avoid them? Because I think good grief, what is happening? I think a lot of times we tend to avoid question askers because if we have a game plan, we just want people that are going to say, yes, that's a great idea. But when we approach people and we say, I'm thinking about this thing, what do you think? And we invite them into that space with us. There's something really beautiful about not having certainty. And this is this conversation that Sharita and I have been having for a while now, where we used to think as people of faith that were raised in faith environments that you had to be certain about everything. Right? And that certainty was kind of equated to holiness. Like the more certain that we were, the more holy we felt. And And there's something really unsettling about uncertainty or about not knowing or not always being able to explain things. But as we're going to talk about tonight, I also think there's something really beautiful about embracing uncertainty and recognizing uncertainty. Because one of the things that I think is really important is to realize that when we talk about certainty, especially when it comes to faith things, like there is no perfect path to find certainty, right? Like everybody's journey, everybody's path, everybody's relationship with holiness is unique and it's individual and it's different from one another. And so when we try to treat everything like cookie cutters so that we all come out thinking and certain of the exact same thing, we remove all of that individuality from it. We remove all of this wrestling from it. And so what we end up with are faith groups and faith communities and people of faith that are just kind of copy and paste, right? Like we just all need to think the same. We all need to do the same thing. So I'm gonna use visuals because I'm a visual person. So I was thinking about how a lot of our churches today kind of look like Jenga blocks. And it's kind of like everybody's the same size, everyone's the same shape, this is what we all believe, this is what we're certain of, this is what we think, right? And so you come into these spaces and you start to explore and you start to ask questions and you start to hear things like, no, just right here, that's where you need to be right now. Don't worry about anything else. And then the next person comes in and they're gonna go right here. And we just kind of assemble these piles of certainty, so to speak, in faith circles. And I think when we are in these spaces where everything needs to look perfect and uniform and everything looks exactly the same, we're often taught that doubts, questions, wonderings, curiosity, no matter how holy it is or not, is bad, is sinful, is a sign of weakness, is a sign of an open door. Anyone ever heard that in church spaces? If you start to ask questions, that's an open door for bad things to start to lurk in your heart and in your mind. And so I want to speak over this narrative of doubt tonight, because I think there is something really beautiful for us to rediscover and reclaim about doubt. And I think we often treat doubt like it's a bad thing, like it's a negative thing, but in so many ways, in so many spaces, doubt is a beautiful, holy thing. So before we go any further, I'm going to direct your attention to these screens, and I want you to listen to this song. I want you to pay attention to these lyrics, and I want you to just kind of use this as a prayer for yourself, because I think when we pray and we say, God, give me doubt, that's not a prayer we're taught in church very often. But I want you to listen to these words, and then we're going to kind of connect this to some red letters of Jesus that may surprise you.
Give me doubt so I can see my neighbor as myself. Give me doubt so I can lay all my weapons on the ground. When the armor of God is too heavy for peace, give me doubt. Give me doubt. Give me doubt so I can see my neighbor as myself. Give me doubt so I can lay all my weapons on the ground. When the armor of God is too heavy for peace, give me doubt. Give me doubt. Give me doubt.
So let me ask you, has anyone ever prayed for doubt? Has anyone ever invited doubt into your life? Sharita? I have. I know that there was a season of reckoning for me where I started to recognize that everything was just yes and okay. Yes and okay. And I started to look around a little bit, especially in faith spaces. I was in a pretty traditional church at the time, a very evangelical church at the time. And there wasn't a lot of doubt. There wasn't a lot of questioning. There wasn't a lot of wondering how or if things could be differently. And I remember feeling like, this is too picture perfect, right? And I feel like if you scratch beneath the surface of this, I'm going to find something different. I'm going to find something more. So when I was invited into a leadership position, one of the things that I started wrestling with was, give me the ability to see what's not being said. Give me the ability to see the things that are struggles that are kind of pushed into the shadows. Give me doubt. Give me questions. Give me the courage to then articulate those questions. So recently, actually about a month and a half ago, I wrote a sermon and I showed up here prepared to give it. And it was one of those nights where I just felt like, this is not the night for this message. I don't know if y'all remember that, but it was a few weeks ago, and I just said, we're just gonna talk. We're just gonna spend the night just getting to know each other, and we kind of mixed each other up at tables. And just something about that night felt off. And I'm so grateful that I did not preach on that red lettered passage that night, because I've had to sit with it for longer. And the more I've sat with it for longer, a whole different piece kind of started to emerge in my mind and in my heart. And can I just challenge you that if you have engaged with scripture so much that it becomes copy and paste, and you only get one thing out of it when you read that story or you hear that story, then a lot of times I think we need to pray prayers like this that say, give me doubt, give me questions, give me eyes to see more than just what I'm used to seeing when I approach this passage. So I'm going to challenge us a little tonight. For those of you that are new or haven't hung out with us for a while, all year we've been doing the red letters of Jesus. So every week we've been looking at a different red lettered passage. We've been struggling to wrestle with it and apply it. And what does that look like to not just understand it, but to mean it and to live it out in our world today? And so I'm going to pull a red lettered passage out that normally we don't talk about in the church any other time but Easter. But it feels like a really appropriate place to talk about when it comes to doubt. And that is found in Matthew 26, verses 36 through 46. I'm going to read the whole thing, and then we're going to talk about some pieces. So it is the story of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. And it says this: Then Jesus went with them to the olive grove called Gethsemane. And he said, sit here while I go over there to pray. He took Peter and Zebediah's two sons, James and John, and he became anguished and distressed. And he told them, my soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and watch with me. He went a little further and bowed his face to the ground, praying, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken from me, yet I want your will to be done, not mine. Then he returned to the disciples and found them asleep. And he said, Peter, couldn't you watch with me for even 1 hour? Keep watch and pray so that you will not give in to temptation, for the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. Ooh, we've heard that taken out of context a lot. Then Jesus left them a second time and prayed again, my Father, if this cup cannot be taken away unless I drink it, your will be done. When he returned to them again, he found them sleeping, for they couldn't keep their eyes open. Anybody ever feel like that? Good to know, Sharita. Okay, challenge accepted. Keep you awake. So verse 44 says this. So he went to pray a third time, saying the same things. And then he came to the disciples and he said, go ahead and sleep. Have your rest. But look, the time has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Up, let us be going, because my betrayer is here. So can we talk about the fact that in the garden, we see a glimpse of Jesus' humanity? In the garden, in this space where suffering is inevitable, and we're not going to get into all of the different theological theories on the crucifixion and atonement theology. We're not going to do that tonight. Come to Coffee and Questions this week. We can talk about that all you want. But for the purpose of this, we're going to talk about these words in the garden, okay? And Jesus is essentially in the garden. He invites his closest friends and says, come watch with me while I wrestle, while I pray. I would be so bold as to say, while I wrestle with doubt, while I question, while I wonder, while I express my fears in prayer. Can we just acknowledge that, like, in this moment, Jesus' humanity is so incredibly beautiful and clear because he cries out to God. Anybody else cried out to God like that recently? Like, what the heck? Why? Does it have to be this way? Is there not another way? Why aren't you answering? Anybody prayed those kind of prayers? Those are prayers of doubt, right? Those are prayers that come from a place in us that is so incredibly personal and so incredibly intimate and authentic that says, I can't put shiny on this because right now this doesn't even make sense. This is hard. This feels big. This feels overwhelming. And so in that space, Jesus simply cries out and says, Father, why? Is there any other way? So a lot of you know, and you've heard me talk about, I do a lot of research related to religious trauma. And so many of you have taken a survey from me over the last few months where we're trying to measure negative religious experiences. And one of the 10 negative religious experiences that I have found over the years is I work with people that this caused damage in them, not just in their faith, but it caused damage in their social life. It caused damage that led a lot of times to addictive behavior, lots of different pieces. But one of those 10 is being in an environment with the inability to express doubt or question. And when we have to hold those things in, and we have to look beautiful and pretty and stay in line and make sure the tower doesn't fall, right? There's a lot of pressure on us in that space. And there's a whole lot of us that we don't get to be authentic about. Because sometimes I think the most authentic pieces of us are the ones that are saying, what's going on? Why? My frustrations, my anger, like Rue shared in that blessing, like stir up disruption in us, because I think a lot of times disruption longs to connect with disruption, right? But when we feel like we got to hold that in, we got to put on the happy face and put on the mask and show up in the space and do the thing and say all the right things and be certain, man, there's something really inauthentic that gets born in that space. Has anybody ever had the experience where you maybe tried to be authentic and you tried to name a doubt or a question in a church environment and you quickly discovered that was not okay in that environment? That you got shut down in that space? Because if that has been an experience of yours, please hear my heart for a second. Faith leader speaking over faith experience, that's not okay. That is not okay. And is there a spider? Oh, a big bug. Cool. I'm proud of you. Holly doesn't do bugs, so that's good. Woo, there's growth. Anyway, I just need you to know that that's not okay. That if you have tried to come and be brave and courageous to ask a question or to express a doubt or to name a concern or to say, is there a different way that this could go? Is there more that we could be doing? Is there something different that could be done here? And you were shut down? For that, I'm sorry. And for that, I grieve on your behalf, because I think that the body of Christ as the church misses out on important growing moments, important growing edges when we sidestep and we avoid those. And so for those that have had that experience, I applaud your courage to ask. And I'm sorry that you were met in that space with that reaction, because I don't think that's an authentic reaction of who our God is and who Jesus was as a person. I know that there's a lot of experiences in this room with doubt, with struggles, with questions. Normally, we would break up into our tables and kind of talk about that for a few minutes, but I decided to do something a little bit different tonight. So I am going to invite, that doesn't count, Chris. I'm going to invite Bob and Holly to come up here for a couple of minutes. I prepped them ahead of time. Okay. So what I asked was that you would each take a couple of minutes and share about your own experiences with doubt and what doubt has taught you, what you've learned from doubt, especially in relation to faith. Do you want to go first?
No.
Would you go first? I'm still recovering from the bug.
Hello. Scott. Hello. Thank you. Doubt, right? I think no matter what it is, whether it's in religion or not, doubt is something that we're always pretty much told that it's not something good. You don't want to doubt. You don't want to do those things. And so I think through religion, definitely, it's almost, if you doubt, then you doubt in what's happening, or you doubt what's out of your control, then you're not doing things right. Because if you have doubt, then God's not going to answer your prayers, or if your prayers don't come true right now, then you're doubting that. So then that's why you're not getting it. I think there's been several things in our life since we've walked our path that we've walked together. One is we had a really crazy, horrible thing that happened with our kids many years ago. So through that, there was a lot of anger, a lot of prayers, but there was a lot of doubt because our prayers didn't get answered right away. And for me, then that made me start processing, because at first when you doubt, right, you think, well, what have I done wrong? Why did it not get answered? Why? It makes you doubt everything. Am I not a good parent? Am I not a good husband? All kinds of doubts travel through your mind. And I think for me, so many were instilled because of the church. Because it was, if you're not doing this right, then this is not going to happen. Or if you pray about something and it doesn't get answered, then it's because you're doing something wrong. And through that process and through the years that it took, come up with the things that happened, and through the process, I'm sorry I don't do very good at this, but as the years went on, and there was still a lot of continued doubt in my heart, and it's something that I've had to deal with. And so, but as we progressed through the years, and as we've learned and gone, and then it makes you start realizing, because one little part, God answered the prayer, and then a little while later, He answered another part of it. And what I'm saying is, for me, my doubt at that time was heartbreaking, horrible, but as I've processed it, and as we've moved through, and then you see God's promises coming together, then I think it makes you realize, and for me, it made me realize how I had to start thinking different about the way that I was taught about church, right? And I think, the big word, is deconstruction, sorry. And it has made me open up my eyes to be able to process that, because there is a huge thing. I think, unfortunately, there's so many things through religion that are taught to us that it's a yes or no. You pray and it's a yes or no. You do this and it's a yes or no. And I don't believe that's the truth. There's maybes, there's no's, there's maybe not right now, there's waits. God has a plan for us and we don't understand it. But you are allowed to doubt. You are allowed to have those doubts. You're allowed to talk to God about those doubts. He never struck me down, and I said a whole lot worse things than anything we're going to say in this room about the circumstances that were going on in our life. And He didn't strike me down, but that was in my doubt. But He allowed me to have doubt. And through that, though, He has allowed me to look at Him different, look at them different, and look at life different around me, because I was allowed to have that doubt. If I wouldn't have, and I would have just squished that doubt every time that I had it, it would have just destroyed me. So I had to embrace the doubt so that we could move forward with our life at that time, knowing and trying to process and trying to figure out how God was going to reveal Himself in them times. And He truly revealed Himself, I think, a lot of different things. My wife got to start her first ministry as lead her back, and that was right in the middle of the crazy times. And that brought a whole another thing of doubt that came with that because of finances and stuff like that. So there's just been a lot of doubt, but through that, knowing that you can embrace the doubt and that it's not horrible to embrace that doubt, that you're allowed to embrace that doubt and bring that into your life, because it opens up doors. And doors, the church may tell you it's not a good thing to open doors, but you have to open doors in order to move forward, right? I can't keep running into the same door because you tell me I can't open the door. Well, I got to open the door. And unfortunately, there's bad things on the other side of that. And unfortunately, there is doubt there. But if you embrace the doubt and take that opportunity to learn from that doubt and to actually seek God to find out what the actual plan is in that doubt, because there is a plan, it makes you a better person on the other end. I don't know if I'm a great person, but I like to think that I'm a better person than I was then.
Hi, everybody. When Christy called me today and asked me to do this, I didn't exactly prepare, because I think I just wanted to be in this room and kind of just follow my heart. I've told bits and pieces of my story in a lot of different spaces, and I try to be very open because so much of the reason I am here and I do the things that I do come from an immense amount of struggle and heartbreak and community. I survived sexual abuse as a child, and so I do not know a faith where there's not doubt. I vividly remember being in a Sunday school classroom and questioning these things that were being told to me when I was probably no older than 6. For my entire childhood, that doubt followed me, and that doubt became a shameful thing for me because I was taught in so many environments not to question and not to doubt, but that doubt was like this sinful thing and this dangerous thing, and that often the outcome of doubt was more pain and more heartache and being outside of this box that is the will of God. And I found myself trying to pursue this image of doing the right thing and then constantly falling short. And what felt in a space of being so chaotic. And there's 2 things that we don't hear the church talk about very often, or to be very blunt, the church doesn't talk about well, and that's trauma and mental health. And often those 2 things go hand in hand. And I look back now on my childhood and I see where there was mental health struggles in those times that started that early. And so I entered teenage years and I fell into addiction, and I fell into patterns of lying and deceiving and sleeping around and all these pieces that were like supposed to be fulfilling to me. I ended up running away from home, and I left the beautiful Colorado mountains and came out here in pursuit of just like this newness and trying to like redesign who I was, and I fell into only those same patterns. And I think something that I talk about a lot is how much the pieces of trauma and mental health pushed me into places of doubting, of questioning, yet I would show up in church service often hungover or often like following some really horrible mental health experiences, and just like with this deep longing for like, this is supposed to be comforting, or this is supposed to be safe, or this is supposed to be where I find purpose, right? And so often we get assigned these ideas that like there is purpose in our pain, and so many times I think we fall into a world, and this may just be me, but we fall into a place where we're like, well, where's the damn purpose? Because it's not showing up, and this sucks, and it hurts. And so I ended up in a very terrifying spiral as a young 20-something-year-old, where I was working an insane amount of hours. I had nobody in my world, and I ended up followed to my car late one night, and I was attacked and raped in a parking lot. And I will never forget surviving that experience and wondering, why did I survive? Where's the purpose in this? And that struggle got me so low that I always say I woke up, but I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep for a while. And I ended up getting up one morning, getting in my car with every intention, a whole plan to crash my car and kill myself, because I could not find the purpose in every single piece of it. I could not find the answers to these questions. And all I felt was not this sense of like, do I believe God exists or not, but that I am too broken, I am too worthless, I have been through too much, I have fallen too far. And I have too many of these doubts and too many of these questions. It doesn't make sense. And somehow my car didn't drive into the wall. And I look back at that time and I can't explain it, because I still have a lot of doubts and I still have a lot of questions, and I still find myself wondering, was that God? Was that gravel? Was that, I don't know. But I do know that my doubts in that time led me to being vulnerable and open the following day. And that being vulnerable and open with the people that emerged in that season, which happened to be Bob and Christy, led me into this really beautiful world of experiencing God, not in the sky and not in these miraculous experiences and not in church services, but experiencing God in the love of people that were willing to say, like, you matter. And we love you, and you just told me your whole life story, and I'm just gonna look you in the eyes and say, like, hey, I want to do life with you. Come stay at our house. Come have dinner with us. I think sometimes, too, in Christian bubbles, we see these experiences where things get really, really, really bad, and then we just expect a happy ending. And that has never been the case. And my husband and I then walked through a season. So Christy and Bob made me and Scott. If any of you don't know that story, it's really funny. Scott was incredible in that season and a source of a lot of healing for me. But we then entered a season where we were doing all the right things again. And then we could not get pregnant. And then we lost babies. And the doubt that came in that season was a doubt that I was afraid to name, because I did not want to. I had survived so much, and I'd gotten to this beautiful time in my life where I felt like things were really good. And it was so scary to name that I was still in a place of doubting whether God was good, or whether God was in control, or whether God was someone who was accessible. And I think the most comforting thing the most confidence I have since that season, because we were blessed with two sweet, beautiful babies that we get to hold and love. And we were blessed in that season with an adorable kiddo that we got to keep in our home through foster care for 18 months. And that has created this huge energy in me to do the work that I do with Family Connection. And out of that season came the heart to co-lead TCG with Bob and Christy, and to say yes to that crazy ask that they asked like in the middle of winter. But I think that one of the most confident pieces that I've had in this season is that my doubts haven't stopped and my questions haven't stopped, but I have found an enormous amount of community in that space, and I have found a God that is totally okay with my questions. And I have found a God that is totally okay with my doubts, and I have found community and people that are vulnerable and raw and loving and affirming and supportive, and so much of those pieces that I never saw in the church growing up that have rallied and said, we don't get it either, but we're gonna do this together. And I think what I want to end with is just this speaking into that if you've ever been in a place, whether you're in a place now, where the sum of your experiences have led you to a place where you wonder, why am I here? Have led you to wonder, why do I keep waking up? Why do I keep trying? Why do I keep showing up? What I want you to know is that your worth is not in the sum of what this world has put on you or what people have put on you, but that your value is in your humanness. Your value is in your breath that's in your lungs, and it's in the way that you do open your eyes and you move, and the way that you show up with and for other people. And we make this world better, every single one of us. I believe that to my core, and I believe that that's God in us. I believe that's God in this world. And yes, doubts are still a part of my every single day, but instead of it being something that is so incredibly negative, it's become something that has made my mind and my heart so incredibly creative. And so, yeah, I guess We'll hand it to you.
Know and do life with them every day. And I know that doubts played a huge role in their faith growth. And being in spaces, Bob didn't really speak to this, but Bob was raised Episcopalian and was raised in this very formal, very ritualistic kind of environment where you don't question anything. You just go, you repeat, you show up, right? And so for him to be in a space to start asking questions and to not have thunderbolts hit him out of the sky was eye-opening, right? Because that was very much what he had been raised to think was going to happen if I asked a question. But what I want you to pick up on, what I hope you picked up on in both of their stories, is I think something very common happens when we encounter doubt in faith spaces. It is often the start of one of two things. When we encounter doubt and we start to verbalize that in communities where we should feel safe, right? So I'm going back to my Jenga pile, okay? And so let's say that I say, hey, that doesn't make any sense to me. I have a question, and I start to kind of rock the boat a little bit. Somebody just quietly says to me, we don't ask that here. Or maybe you'd be more comfortable somewhere else, right? And suddenly that person with doubts, not there anymore, because they don't feel comfortable in a church space. They don't feel comfortable in a faith space, right? And I know that bad thing happened to you, but we don't question, we don't doubt. We just believe that it's all for good, it's all for glory, right? And so that person just suddenly doesn't feel safe in this space anymore to name doubts or to name struggles. And so we end up with these faith communities that are missing. They're missing experiences, they're missing beauty, they're missing growth, because instead of embracing and leaning into those edges and learning from them and building from them, right? And we build something completely different. But instead of that, we just keep weakening the community as a whole because we just want conformity instead of curiosity. And let me tell you, we serve a God who designed us to be curious. And we serve a God who can sure as heck handle our doubts and our questions and our wonderings about our life, about the world, about injustices, but also about faith spaces. And when we have those doubts about faith spaces and we start to question those things, right? The other thing that typically happens is you either disconnect because you don't feel safe, right? So I expressed my doubts, I didn't feel safe, I didn't feel heard, I didn't feel valued, so I'm gonna disconnect. I don't wanna be in this space anymore. I'm gonna find something else over here by myself. Or it becomes a catalyst for deconstruction. It becomes a catalyst for a lot of us to say, what in the world? Like, why have I been raised my entire life to never ask a question? Why have I been raised my entire life to never wonder? Why don't we talk about the fact that in the garden, Jesus is saying, is there any other way but this? But we really gloss over the question, right? And we just focus on what comes after that, because nobody wants to talk about why are we asking a question in that moment to begin with. And here's what I want you to understand, okay? I am a firm believer that we were designed for community and we were designed for connection. And one of the things that I have discovered again and again is many times my doubts become a source of connection, right? So I'm switching from Jenga to Magnetiles that I swiped from Eliana. So when I go to Sharita and I say, hey, process this with me, right? That doubt, that curiosity joins us deeper in connection and in friendship, right? Or when Bob and I sit and he listens to me doubt why we do things the way we do things in the city, and why is it okay that we are apathetic and not struggling with injustice that we see on our streets every day. And when I get frustrated in that space and he listens to me and he lets me vent in that space, right? That's a space where we connect in relationship, we connect in community. If I go to Holly and we're talking about the foster care system and we're frustrated and we have doubts over why certain decisions are made, right? That becomes a connection point. And all of these become connection points that say, I can't just leave and go hide and disappear like I can in a system where nothing is ever questioned, because my doubts have been vocalized and like they're valid and they've built community around them. Like we are a community of doubters in this room. We are a community that brings questions and wonderings and curiosities to sacred text, to holy music, to friendship, to relationship, to justice work. And when we build a community based upon those things, right? That's not saying, hear me very carefully, I'm not saying, ooh, TCG, amazing. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is authentic community that's able to be honest and able to name things that are hard. I think that was the design of Scripture. And so when we look at the life and the ministry of Jesus and we look at the red letters of Jesus, what I see in the garden is Jesus attempting to do this, right? Not only is he trying to connect and cling to his heavenly Father, who he's crying out to and saying, is there any other way, right? Like when we are in that space of questioning and wondering and struggling, there is this magnetic pull between us and the divine a lot of times, and it's often vocalized as why, or questions, or not understanding, or like we talked about at Coffee and Questions this week, words we can't even vocalize. It's just, ugh. And sounds sometimes because we're crying or we're frustrated or we're angry. But I also think that Jesus was trying to do this with the disciples. He says, come with me, to his closest 3 disciples. And he says, stay here with me while I wrestle in this space. He's being authentic and he's being vulnerable and he's inviting friends into his doubts, into that space. And he's saying, I need you to be with me in my weakest moment. I need you to be with me while I wrestle and while I question, because I really believe our culture often takes doubts and makes them an isolating thing. But doubts are designed to be something that draws us together and brings us together, brings us connection with one another. So in so many ways, I think we could argue that Jesus was like the ultimate original deconstructor, right? He came and everything about his ministry was designed to deconstruct what existed at the time. He questioned power structures and dynamics. He got angry, right, at the emphasis being placed more on the checklist of religion than it did on relationships with people and people that mattered. Jesus defied social constructs and rules. He talked to women in the street, like you didn't do that back then, right? He talked to Gentiles. You didn't do that back then. Like he defied these cultural norms, and he questioned and he wrestled and he doubted. And so our culture, especially our faith culture in the Bible Belt, treats deconstruction as this big, horrible, terrible thing. How dare you deconstruct in those spaces? And that word is treated like it's a dangerous thing. But y'all, I would argue that deconstruction is really one of the most beautiful, sacred journeys that we can go on that says, I don't just want to copy and paste. I don't just want to believe because that's what I was taught. I want to wrestle and question and doubt and figure it out for me so that it's personal and it's tangible and it's practical and I understand it and I can engage with it in that space. I think that there's something really, really powerful about understanding that, but I also think there's something really powerful about naming. But there's a lot of people who are still struggling by being isolated when they were the Jenga tower, right? I don't feel comfortable to ask. I don't feel comfortable to wrestle, so I'm over here all by myself right now. Let me tell you something. I know a lot of you in this room, that represents you not long ago, and this felt like a safe place to come and to try to build community again. And I will tell you from the get-go, we are far from perfect. We are gonna make mistakes. We're not gonna get it right sometimes. And when those happen, I invite you to come and let's talk about it. Let's name those things. Let's figure them out. Let's embrace them as growing edges, okay? So I tell you that to say, I can't promise you that it's gonna be perfect all the time, but I can promise you that we can have conversations and that they're going to be purposeful. But I know this, the church today is broken. It is broken because it shuts down any amount of growth and individuality. And it seeks conformity and it seeks certainty in so many spaces. But if you are a person who has felt kind of like you were out in the wilderness on your own with questions and doubts and wondering and longing for connection again, hear me loudly. We need you in this space. The church needs people to come back with their doubts and with their questions and with their wrestling, because what we have built is a shaky foundation at best. And the only way that we rebuild is to reunite that which has felt like it wasn't welcomed, or it was silenced, or it was sidelined. Those questions, those wonderings, those is there any other way spirits, like Jesus prayed in the garden. Like, do we really have to do communion only this way? Do we only have to do baptism this way? Like, is there any other way we could express these values? Are there different things? Come and ask those questions. Because when we ask those questions, they lead to beautiful new ideas and manifestations of things. And so I want to share this song with you, and then we're gonna wrap up. Anybody heard of Flamey Grant? Oh, y'all are in for fun. Okay, so I discovered a Christian drag queen lately who I adore and love with everything in me. She goes by the name Flamey Grant. So if you were around in the 90s and you knew Amy Grant, there's your play on words. Raised in the Bible Belt, just released her first album recently, and it is called Bible Belt Baby. I highly suggest that you listen to the whole thing. Several of the songs from that record have made it onto our background playlist, so you'll hear them in weeks to come. My favorite probably won't, but I'll tell you what it is later if you want to know, so you can Spotify it. But anyway, this song recently became, this is fantastic, recently became the #1 Christian song for a very short period of time, and only could these lyrics allow a amazing drag queen from the Bible Belt to have the #1 Christian pop song that is actually now nominated for a Dove Award, which is even more fantastic. So anyway, also she's coming to Springfield in a few weeks, so there's fun for that. So I'm super, super stoked about that. But anyway, the song is called Good Day, and it is so new. It does not have like a fancy lyric video yet. So you have old school lyrics simply because the lyrics are beautiful and they are crazy important, and I need you not to miss the lyrics. So Holly and Sharita are gonna hand these out for you. And as they're passing them out, here's my heart in sharing this song with you, not only because it's just amazing and fantastic, but I want you to hear this. In spaces where people who are different, who look different, who have different artistic expressions, who think different, who vote different, right? Whatever that looks like. Typically, the church tends to push away different, right? We try to get different to look like all the rest of us. And I think there's something so incredibly needed in our world today and in faith spaces today for differences to learn to come together and make something new, not something cookie cutter. And so this is a cry from the heart of someone who has known a great deal of religious trauma that says, I'm gonna come back home. And by home, they mean the church. And when they say, I'm coming back home because you can't keep me quiet anymore, I need you to know that that's my hope and my heart for every single person in this room. If you have ever felt pushed away or silenced or shut out of a conversation, come back and re-engage in spaces that need to be rebuilt. And they need questions and doubts to be welcomed, not quieted. So I want you to enjoy this performance that I found when they performed this in a gymnasium in Texas. So it's not the greatest music video, but you need to experience the whole thing. So here you go. You may have to turn it up a little, Scott.
It's been a while since I said got my chance. It's been a while since I wanted to. I always felt a little depressed. Oh, it's been a while. It's been a while since I went and let down my guard. 'Cause I carried away the words you said. That makes it just a little bit hard to reject the lies you perpetuate. You're not the keeper of the pearly gate, and it's been a while. I'm coming back to fight for my place. Good day to come back home. You sent me away, but I was never alone. You were afraid there was not enough, but you can't run out of love. So I'm here to stay, and I'm sitting in the front row. It's a good day to come out of the shadow. Got me good in every way, so I raise my voice to celebrate a good day. It's been a while since I could admit that there was something missing. And I seem to know what love is. Yeah, what love is, and I'm not content to fade into the crowd. You decide who's in or out. I'm coming back. I'm living proof that it all belongs without a doubt. Good day to come back home. Send me away, but I was never alone. You were afraid there was not enough, but you can't run out of love. So I'm here to stay, and I'm standing in the front row. It's a good day to come out of the shadow. God made me good in every way, so I raise my voice to celebrate a good day. I'm gonna celebrate. It's a good day, nothing's gonna keep me out of the light. I'm not gonna hide, I got a heart in the right place, covered in the good graces of an endless love. It's a good day, nothing's gonna keep me out of the light. I'm not gonna hide, I got a heart in the right place, covered in the good graces of an endless love. Good day, come back home. You sent me away, but I was never alone. You were afraid there was not enough, but you can't run out of love. So I'm here to stay, and I'm dancing in the front row. It's a good day to come out of the shadow. God made me good in every way, so I raise my voice to celebrate a good day. Yes, I will. It's a good day, nothing's gonna keep me out of the light. I'm not gonna hide, I got a heart in the right place, covered in the good graces of an endless love. It's a good day, nothing's gonna keep me out of the light. I'm not gonna hide, I got a heart in the right place, covered in the good graces of an endless love.
that fantastic? Like, aren't the lyrics of that song just so incredibly beautiful? I love them. I have listened to this song on repeat for like the last 5 days in my office because I think so much of my heart, right? I tell people all the time, I could have been the poster child of telling religion, deuces, I'm out, and like leaving. But I believe that we are not supposed to be alone. And I believe there's something bigger that pulls at us. And I believe that there is purpose for all of us. And so my heart keeps saying, keep coming back into this space and ask questions and dig deeper and build community and invite more people to ask questions and to wrestle, because in that, we all grow and we all benefit. So I'm going to challenge you to end tonight simply by sharing with each other at your tables for a few minutes. It's a good day to be honest, to be authentic, and maybe to name a doubt or two that you wrestle with in your world. So I'm just going to invite you just to engage in some conversation and talk about that with each other. Where are places that you have doubts, or how has doubt played a role in your life? What doubts do you bring to the table tonight? And just take a few minutes and name those with each other, and then feel free to hang out. There's more food, connect, all the things. We love you guys, and I'm glad you're here tonight. We're serving as a roadblock. Don't mind us. Oh, I'm glad. I'm so glad that you were here.
Yeah, but I'm at church, like, they could call me. They should have my number, yeah. Well, they should